Good conversation. Today's the 9th, 3/9. Tomorrow's Morgan's birthday.
Woo!
Is it?
I got to do something. I got to do something fast. No, I'm kidding.
We all know you have something doing.
Yeah, we do. Yeah. I'm going to put out a post. Oh, I better be quiet. No, she won't like that.
I'd organised a date for Friday night, and then James is going bush. So I'm taking my mum on a date instead.
I didn't know how she organised date night when I was out bush. I don't know what that says about our relationship.
We say that's SOL here. Shit out of luck. Okay, let me just play the intro, and that ought to give them enough time. I just woke up from a power nap. I need the minute. Hang on. Still taking a while. We're getting suppressed on the notifications. We got 28 people in the house and counting. We got Kirsty Lee and James Greenshields in the house again. We do this every few weeks. Yeah, welcome. Yeah, and I didn't know anything. I saw James put up a post and said we were going to talk about something that's dear to my heart. And I said, Morgan, what's that all about? So she told me how it happened. But the thing was, before I saw that, I saw 2 days ago, I think it was 2 days ago, Kirsty put up that post about the tsunami, which normally when I start reading a post like that, I don't get too far, but I read the whole thing. I was like, wow, there's a lot being said in that. So before we jump into the subject at hand, which I'm glad you're here to hold space, because that's important. That thing you wrote, though, or it was an actual dream. It was an actual dream, right?
Yeah, the dream I had, was a tsunami, and that was, I shared the dream summarized, and that it was so, because when I don't remember dreams a lot. Like James has so much memories of his dreams when he wakes up, but when I remember a dream, I know that it's profound for me. And I really remembered that one, and I woke up as soon as I had it, and I was lying there. It was early in the morning, and I was just reflecting on it, and I knew that I would be processing it for some time, and processed it for the next couple of days, and I thought I got the answer, and then more things happened in my life, and then I got the answer, and I realized that it was just such a it was such a profound vision for me for these times that we're in. And where I came to after a couple of weeks of things going on in my life and also the collective was there were a couple of things that happened to me where I was offered triggerings of emotional woundings from as a child, and that emotional wounding was betrayal. And I really went into that, and the situation showed me that actually this time I don't want to harden myself. I don't want to try and protect myself or shut people out. I actually want to keep my open to a new degree. And it was a new degree because it was, and all of us who are on this path know that every single time we do it, we're opening more and more and opening ourselves as a vessel for grace and saying, okay, I'm calling more grace in, whatever that looks like, good, bad, whatever. So it was a call to me to say, I am allowing myself to remain open in this situation. I'm not shutting out. There's no need for me to punish or close or anything like that. And it was really powerful for me. And since then, I've seen many people talk about it, and I think Morgan even wrote something about it, which I saw briefly, but I haven't had a chance to read it yet. But I know that the collective has experienced this, and this is, I think, also the time shift, the timeline shift that we're experiencing is we're going to be closed, or we need to stay open, because that's what is needed for this organic evolvement. So that was my experience.
Yeah, I thought it was really cool because it was the energetics behind it, like, you know, spoken from the first person, basically. You know, I mean, like you were going, you described the whole thing. I actually forgot it was a dream, and I was like, did this shit happen, man? I mean, what happened? You know, we go to higher ground, we're climbing stairwells. I thought it was interesting too, because now, especially now that you explain it, because you were like, some people are listening and some people aren't. And then you went on, and then you said, and my daughter was there, and I just basically, you know, like hugged her and was ready to accept whatever. Right.
Yeah.
And that's what you just said. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's so important to stay open to everything, because we have had conditioning, you know, to attach to belief systems, and you know, then you grab a bigger surfboard, and then you get a bigger surfboard, and then but you know, at the end of the day, you got to be open. Morgan said something to me the other night. We've been going through, I don't know if it's over yet. I think it might be. It was about a 5 or 6 day period, sacred sexuality, masculinity. And she said something like, I think you've got something going on, you know, like there's something unresolved, or I forget exactly what she said. You know, you've had this something going on. And I said, you know, basically it's not relevant to me. What's relevant is the fact that I'm open to it. Like, it could be true, might not be true. I might have some unconscious programming, or, you know, but I'm open to it. So I feel like if I integrate it, whether I know it's true or not isn't the point. What's the point is that I'm open to the possibilities of, you know, not only things that we want, but things that we don't want or don't want to identify with. Right.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that stops you misidentifying it too. If you go in specifically focused on one specific element, you might actually miss the context. And more often than not, the context is more important than the actual specific issue.
Yeah. Yeah. The story. Like, that's what I've been coming across, you know, just like understanding that, you know, like the three of us sitting down right now and the people that are on the live and replay, it's the soul coordinates being in the same energetic proximity. It's not even about the stories, you know, because there's 20 people, there's 20 stories, right? So yeah, I've seen that happen over the, you know, actually over a couple of years, you know, or even more than that, when we've been traveling and we meet people, and you meet people that, you know, online, and, you know, that's always interesting, because it's not always congruent, and other things pop up, and, you know, then you're faced with judgment, and as soon as you make a judgment, there's an inferiority or a superiority, you know, a pedestal or a, you know, a lower level perception of something or somebody. Yeah. Which, you know, and I didn't plan it this way. I tried to get in about 15 minutes of shut-eye. I was waiting for you to message me back. I didn't know what was going on. Then I figured, oh, he probably handled this with Morgan. And I fell asleep and woke back up. So I didn't have time. You know, I don't plan anything. But what Kirsty wrote about, like this, and what she just explained, is like a perfect segue into the subject at hand. Now, you verbalized it in that post announcing this show. So I'm going to throw it on you because I wasn't privy to the conversation with you and Morgan, but I kind of know where it's going. But I'd rather, you kind of let us know first, if you don't mind.
There, got you. Firstly, I don't plan anything either, mate.
Yeah.
So it goes where it needs to go, as they always do. But the thing I specifically posted about, because Morgan mentioned that you've been talking about masculinity and a lot, and how men are traveling through this particular time period at the moment. And I got off when I wrote that post actually to share, I just literally had 2 phone calls to 2 separate people who are now grieving men in their life. One was a man, one was a woman. And they both of them were at a very different level of consciousness, say, than I would have had a conversation with people 5 years ago. 5 years ago, there would have been a lot of anger, a lot of why, focusing on the things that realistically aren't helpful, but when one's in the emotion, one gets locked into. Whereas these 2 conversations were really elevated. One was a lady who had gone through a separation and knew the only way that this gentleman wasn't going to take his own life was to go back to him. But she also knew that he was abusing her, and she needed to take a stand for herself and for him as well. And so he chose a path to let go of this realm and attempt to let go of the pain. And this is a fairly similar story to the other one. A gentleman, again, just wasn't able to open up, wasn't able to feel like he had a way forward, and so again chose the option. But the conversations with these people were love and compassion, and there wasn't judgment at that person's action or that person's choice. There was a deep soulful desire for that person to be in a better place. And I really think that shows a dramatic shift in maturity of those that are supporting people in hard times at the moment, particularly men.
Yeah, we had somebody on in the past few shows, and it's a practitioner. It was a woman who's been doing it a long time. Don't ask me who it is, but I said, has anything changed in your practice? Because I ask practitioners that sometimes just to kind of get a feel if there's some kind of general evidentiary type of characteristics or symptoms of anything to detect. Are we going, are we expanding? And this person said to me that they've been getting a lot of men, and that they're confused, they don't know what to do, identities being stripped, and just basically effed, and actually, just speaking from my own experience, that's a great sign. And I know from talking to you before, the times we've talked before, given your story, your journey, I know, with some of the episodes that you talked about, and of course with your time in the military and what occurred in those, seminal moments, both, in the military with your daughter. I mean, I know you've had to have felt, I don't want to say suicidal, although I'm not afraid of the word, but I know you felt very much in a dark spot. And I cannot relate to the military part of it, not in this incarnation, but because I know that's a whole different bag. That's a whole different bag there. I mean, that's just like like throwing a match onto a gasoline, right? But yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say is that that confusion, even if it brings a little anger and projection, is actually a good sign and the potential for the opportunity to transform.
Couldn't agree more.
And that's what we've talked about again in the last 2 weeks, is that every single time that force rises up, that anger, that projection, we call it the dark witch, when it rises up, it gives our light another opportunity to stand in strength and to create that strong boundary, and not in a wall rigid sense, right, but in a softness for that to be able to bounce off, but to get through if it chooses. and to be able, but to know that I can stand here and it's not going to hurt me.
Right. Yeah, that's a really big one, because I know I've seen that in throughout my life. Of course, now you have the 20/20 vision, you have the hindsight, but even like with Morgan and I obviously, like we all do, we all had programs when we meet, and then you start to work them out together, and it's not like always smooth. I mean, we get along very well. I was much more inclined to get emotional if triggered and raise my voice. And I've probably raised my voice twice in the last few months. Once was during the middle of this catastrophic weather we had over here when we went down to my hometown and had no water for 4 days, when PayPal put a stop on my card. And then the other time I think was real quick with her, where I just kind of snapped. I was tired. But what I'm getting at is that one of the things that I learned in my relationship with her, which I had kind of gotten the information leading up to her, was that when a man raises his voice, it's seen far differently than what he thinks it looks like when it's a feminine involved, because they're coming from a totally different place. And that's a pretty big deal. To me it was, because at that point I had to make a conscious effort to keep that in mind, and it didn't take long to get past it. But yeah, they're coming from a totally different place. And I guess for me, I don't know about you, James, but for me, I could not begin to understand where I was coming from until I could understand where she was coming from, so to speak. Like seeing things through her eyes kind of got me to the point where I could start looking at myself and being honest about it.
Well, mate, at the start, like, I was so emotionally numb, I couldn't tell you in any moment what I was feeling. And so, there's a classic story of Kirsty, being in the kitchen when I got home from work. I was in the military at that stage, and like, I was on the up and up in the military too. I was just about to be, I'd just been selected for a promotion course to the next rank of lieutenant colonel, and the military just saw a lot of utility in me, a lot of, I was ticking all the right boxes for them. But get home, and my time in Iraq and my awakening, which started to happen, in funnily enough, under the shadow of the ziggurat of Ur, the 6,500-year-old temple to the moon god. That's where my awakening really started to happen. But I was confused, and I really needed to belong to something. And the uniform gave me that, because I didn't know the deeper level understanding of belonging. So I clutched onto something, and that was the military was one of it. But I came home from work one day, and Kirsty just simply asked a simple question, how you going? And I turned on her, and I really turned aggressively on her. And she said, "Why are you angry?" And I yelled at the top of my voice, "I'm not fucking angry," as I put my fist through the cupboard. Now,
I'm laughing because that's that way before Morgan, though. This is going way back. I used to do that.
Yeah, and like, you do laugh because it's like, no, champ, you're not angry, man. You've just lost
Right.
all understanding of anything.
I just went, okay.
And but the thing is, Abby was 2. My oldest daughter was 2, and her eyes are like dinner plates. And I looked at that, and in the back of my mind, something clicked, but another part of me didn't, because I was too in the emotion and too held in the story. Until later on, when I started to be educated about emotional literacy on the way to becoming emotionally intimate, Abby's eyes became my barometer. So if her eyes dilated, I would exit stage left, and I'd go and I'd spend time on myself, generally hitting a punching bag or something like that, or yelling outside, to allow myself to go in and channel the energy in a way that it wasn't being vectored into the home. I mean, speak of the military, the Maori or the Maori from Aotearoa, which is New Zealand, it's the traditional name of New Zealand. They're a warrior people. I mean, that's actually how they took New Zealand in the first place. But that nation of people, in fights, in conflict, in war, they would suck the last breath of their enemy out as they killed them.
God.
Like, it's intense. Just the intensity of the violence is there. But if we were in modern day society attempting to put our mind into that and judge it, you're going to miss it completely because you're totally out of context. So just stepping back from it, that energy then in the warriors would come back. But you can't have that energy in the tribe, in the actual village. So they're met on the outskirts of the village by the elders and the people of the village, and a haka starts, an honor of what they've done. And they're taken to a water course, always into the water, always into the feminine. And the women hold space. And if you've ever heard the haka and the hairs in the back of your neck rise, wait until you hear the women in song, which comes up over the top of the haka.
Wow.
Like that with tears. It's like truly intense. And they would sing and hold the frequency of the cleansing and the honoring cleansing that would occur. And all that energy would be let go down river. And when it was finally done, the elders would then bring them into the village and they would be honored in a real way. And the village would have their men back.
Right.
We've lost that in all respects. We've lost initiation for men. We've got gangs of uniformed people walking around with fully loaded pistols and things on their hips, calling themselves police. And they're uninitiated people. Look at Michael Meade, the mythologist. He's beautifully articulating this. The military is exactly the same. And that misunderstanding of that masculine energy and the inability to vector it in its truest way, it causes collateral damage, which then causes a stigmatism in society, confusion in society, not only with men but with women, and fear in women, and then fear in men because I don't want to do it and hurt my woman or whatever. So I don't know what to do with this baggage, and that's a place in which you mentioned. The therapist is seeing more men. Well, more men are turning up in this place now. But what's brilliant, they're actually putting their hand up and saying, "Shit, I just don't know what to do with it."
Yeah.
Well, I think part of the reason that's happening is because there's been an acknowledgement, because the feminine has expanded to a degree, and is seen, it was able to see things. Because to me, everything comes through that part of us first, that feminine part of us first, because that's where the compassion is. That's where the real Sophia wisdom is, right? And so I think there's been a shift that has come from the feminine side to really, I don't know if you could say put themselves in our shoes, but certainly look at the differences in the journey, and in a nutshell, how the matrix, so to speak, has stacked the cards against the masculine energy. As an example, last night, now there's no coincidence, right? So I'm watching this commentary. I was watching videos last night, processing just different stuff, comedy, movie clips, and just different things. I came across this commentary, 30-minute commentary, kind of a voiceover commentary of the movie Platoon.
Yep.
And I had just before that been watching the director, Oliver Stone, and the writer on Joe Rogan. He was talking about how that movie was basically a loose autobiography of his experience, combining characters and different things, right? But my point is that when I was watching it, one of the things that was brought to light in the conversation of the narrator, and even in Stone's interview with Joe Rogan, was what happens when they come home, right? So if you look at that from an energetic standpoint, it could be a household or a business or a society or a village. This guy's gone out there, this masculine energy's gone out there, like you said, outside that circle, like the Maori, and, gone into this deep state of really a distorted masculine, encouraged and aligned with the highest values and ideals that the society has sold us, and then comes back and there's no support. And we've all known, and I'm sure you've known a lot more than me, but I've got a friend right up the road we've talked about it a few times, and some other friends, where from a psychological standpoint, in and of itself, there's just absolutely no support there. And that to me is kind of how the man, coming home, like you said, coming home from work, you walk in the door, you think everything's fine, you're in alpha male mode, and I'm getting things done, and your wife just says, "Hey, how you doing?" And then the fist goes through the cupboard. You know what I mean? I think it's starting to be, acknowledged, and therefore they're starting to step up because they feel safer.
There was a comment made before, I think it was from Morgan, about deactivating the war gene, how it's helpful. Did you want to speak to that?
You can speak if you want.
A few years ago, James realized that your war gene was so prevalent throughout your familial line, right? Your need to go to war.
So my soul incarnation line, as well as my bloodline, had a warrior and like you're talking about the imbalanced war running right through those points to hit me.
Yeah.
Including my father being a Vietnam veteran and stuff, and coming back with undiagnosed post-traumatic stress.
Yeah. And there was a beautiful process where he went through one day, and it was after he had truly come home, though. And what you're saying, Todd, about that coming home process, absolutely, that's so important, is that because that brings the sense of belonging back to self, which allows us to belong within our community and our society. And once we've done that, then we can deactivate that need to go to war. And James felt that he did that, and he did that. Was 2-3 years ago or something anyway, and that he said that's it, there's no more need. And it's interesting that we've had 2 daughters as well, and they've got no interest in any of that, and so that has been deactivated in our, as far as we're concerned, is in projecting that into the reality now. So I agree totally.
Let me draw another microcosm, right? This is great. So I've seen it 2 places. One, I've seen it when men have come back, like from Afghanistan, Iraq. Let's go back a few years. And 2, when they come out of a prolonged incarceration, like prison, And what happens is, because when I was on the streets, those first 2 years back in 2011 and 12 and 13, I was amazed at how many homeless people were vets. And if you listen to their stories, they basically, like the people that have been, imprisoned, incarcerated for an extended period of time and then coming back into the free world, they didn't know what to do. I literally met a guy, an Iraqi veteran, under a bridge one night, sleeping in his, that sleeping bag that goes all the way up over your head, with his contents in a bag that was hanging up from the bottom of the bridge, I guess so animals wouldn't get it. But in talking to this guy, he absolutely didn't know what to do. He was dysfunctional in what he thought was a functional society that really didn't have any support for him. And so that's what I'm getting at. I think from a kind of an analogy standpoint, that's kind of where I see this frequency for what is mostly incarnated in a man. It doesn't always work that way, but they're basically coming out of the jungle and they're going, well, I'm not a warrior anymore. That's not going to work. Everything I've been told that I was, that created my identity, is gone. And if they're fortunate, by whatever way, the first thing they can find, I think, I don't know what other path there would be, is to find, however that may be, through a partner, through themselves, through a mother, through a sister, that feminine energy that just is the constant and then just holds the space for you to then go through your metamorphosis.
The thing that's not happening, but this is not just a military thing. I know your nation has had so many more people go through conflict in the last 20 years, but our small nation has as well. And it's like my unit, 2nd Cavalry Regiment. When I was in that unit, we'd been constantly having people deployed, large numbers of the regiment, since 1999. And I left in 2010 from the actual military. And it was like when I joined back in 97, when I first went into the regiment in 97, you'd have the whole thing. It'd be 500, 600 people. And, you know, sport would be played. Everyone would know everyone from all the different squadrons and stuff. That for that, like, massive period of time, you know, you didn't even know quite regularly people going in and out of the regiment. So that's happened, and there's been a lot of people in conflict. But it's not just the military aspect. Archetypally, it's anyone who goes into this type of that type of environment where it is uniformed, it is very rigid, it is masculine or testosterone in energy. It's all doing focused, and then all of a sudden be stripped of that ability to operate in that, have the uniform stripped off them, have the skills go through disability or whatever. So it happens a lot to lots of people. But the one thing I wanted to say about this is the ancient, the Egyptian myth of the battle of the upper and the lower Nile, and how that actually was sorted out. Because if people remember the myth, Horus, son of Isis and Osiris, fights Set, who's his uncle, and his vengeance against his father's death, and lots to it. There's a lot of deep stuff to it too that a lot of people miss out in the fight, including Isis's spear, where she throws and actually strikes Horus, and pulls it out and gets really upset that she's hit her son, but at the same time she did it on purpose. And then she throws it and actually hits Set, and Set looks at her. Now, you've got to be careful with myth, because often they're changed over a period of time based on what people want you to hear from it. But the language used is, how could you kill the brother of the father of your son? And so he's going through the patriarchal, the masculine line, and she looks at him and pulls the spear out so as not to actually defeat him. And again, the conflict ensues. Now, the other character in this whole myth is Thoth, who's Mercury or Hermes in Roman and Greek mythology. And this figure is the messenger of the gods. And what Thoth does is goes between Horus's army and bandages up and provides first aid and gets them back on the battlefield, and then goes to Set's army and bandages them up and gets them back on the battlefield, and keeps going backwards and forwards. Now, people might say that's a turncoat, you know, that's like a double agent. No, they're completely missing the whole point, because of Thoth's role in the end. And he can't fulfill his role until the energy is completely dissipated, until the has completely been maxed out. And then, and only then, can he come in and settle the lasting peace for the unification of the Nile. So you look at any fight, you get two kids together, and there's huge energy there, and you try and separate them, and it doesn't, it just might go down a bit, or it might even escalate a bit. The issue is that energy needs to flow, and to channel it in a way which is non-destructive, and someone won't be hurt, undermined, or demeaned, but the other person gets this knowledge, this knowledge of that energy, and the fact that, yes, I feel an injustice. So allow that energy to go, because in the moment I'm acting in emotion, and once the emotion has flowed, and then I can see reason. Reason can't be seen in emotion. Reason is so powerful in a settled state, because in a settled state, I can find out that possibly, you know, the injustice hasn't been done, or something else can be settled. But that energy must dissipate and go somewhere. Otherwise, you know, I won't get involved. Many people have asked me to come in and do workplace conflict or resolution. It doesn't work in the way that people want it done, and people know this constantly. That energy needs to be dissipated, and it needs to be vectored in a controlled way for that lasting peace to be established.
Go ahead, Kirsty. Go ahead.
That choice to deactivate the war gene that you're talking about, that energy being dissipated, it is a choice. It's always a choice. You know, I'm deciding that do no longer need to go to war, and therefore my descendants will no longer need to go to war. I deactivate that within my DNA. It's a choice. And I take it back to the micro again. I've always said to our daughters, whenever they're having a squabble and they go in that loop, she did it, so I'm going to do it, and so she did it, so they just do it, And so what I say is, well, someone has to stop at one point. At any point, one of you can choose to stop this, and that's how easy it is. And it's taught to us from such a young age to keep fighting. We should keep fighting, and then someone bigger than us will come in and pull us apart and sort it out. You sort yourself out. You sort yourself out, and then we'll just get on our way until we come back at it again, and then that person will come in again. No, step away. That authority figure steps away. What are we going to do now? Oh, one of us actually has to stop here.
That's interesting what you're both saying. From an energetic standpoint, something I experienced quite a few times back in my old life, where I had multiple offices with multiple managers in each office. And occasionally I'd get called in for the conflict resolution. And just by chance, I came across something that worked after like 2 or 3 times. And that was what James was talking about with, like, say, the 2 forces on each side of the battlefield. I would just shut up and watch them, and one would start talking to the other one, and then the voice would get louder, and then he'd start screaming. Then the other one would start screaming. Energetically, this is just like a fist fight, but it's a professional atmosphere. And what would happen every time, once they exhausted themselves, everything was rosy, So it's very interesting what you said about allowing that energy to run. So let me throw this one at you. So this is kind of what's been coming into our field, into my field as well, and it's really interesting. Thank God Morgan knows how to explain it all. And that is like going back to your to that battlefield situation, or even the one I just talked about. So you've got this distorted masculine facing a distorted masculine, and that's something very familiar to us. We know what to do, right? I mean, we know that, whether it be the business arena or any other arena. Sports could even do it. And so is there, this is kind of a question statement, but is there a new configuration that's occurring in the transition to our higher perfection, where the distorted masculine, let's just say in me, is now sitting with, laying with, breaking bread with the divine masculine in me? Like, there's something in the distorted masculine that, for me anyway, looks like a surrender, as there's been a surrender to the divine feminine, that is now surrendering painfully, to this divine masculine, which at the end of the day is me. But still, if you just think about it, again, metaphorically or with imagery, it's one thing for a distorted masculine to lay in the bosom of a divine feminine who has created that space and stood there while he's gone through all his antics. It's another thing to consider the energy of a distorted masculine laying his head in the divine masculine's chest in the same manner. And I think maybe that's going to be, from an energetic standpoint, something that we're all going to be, presented with.
It's actually such a beautiful thing. The 2 things that come to mind that when you were speaking is the ability to elder ourselves, especially in the absence of elders in society, and the divine balanced masculine within me holding the immature masculine and eldering them, not parenting them, but eldering them. There's a distinct difference between eldering and parenting. I won't go into right now, but one is predominantly around detachment. The point that requires is this level of I suppose energetic maturity within ourselves to have those that simultaneous conversation going. And I think Patricia mentioned the apple, blame Adam's apple. What a lot of people forget is the the Genesis story of the Garden of Eden with the two trees in it, one the tree of life and one the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Everyone says it's the tree of knowledge, but it's not. It's the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and it's the fruit from that. And my interpretation on this, and it's something that really has helped me with my understanding, is that fruit is when I understand good and evil. If I understand good and evil, it means that what I've done is placed a label on evil and a label on good, which means I've judged.
Yeah.
So the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is judgment. And what is judgment associated with emotionally? Shame and guilt. Because a great example is you go to the court of law. If you are wrong, you are bad, you are guilty. And who judges you that? Not the judge. It is a jury of your own peers. Shame is a social emotion. So now I'm not only feeling guilty, I'm feeling ashamed. And then I go through this whole sequence of contraction and pain starting because of the suppression of the emotion. And then all of a sudden something happens to me and it hits the pain. It triggers me. I allow it to trigger me because of the pain that I'm storing. And all of a sudden I lash out. Because I lash out, I go back into the loop of feeling bad, wrong, judged, guilty, shamed. And this is called the judgment cycle. So if the divine elder in me doesn't judge the immature masculine, matter of fact, it's the smile on the face going, I know you because I've stepped in your shoes before. And the first time I experienced this truly was when I owned my shit and I went to this workshop and they were doing anger catharsis, and like 8 large men tried to hold me down for over 10 minutes, and I lifted them all off the ground. And it was that intense moment. It was probably 50 people in the room.
It's pretty intense, though. You hadn't noticed.
Sounds like it. Like I said, when I come over there and I go to the bush, I'm going with you.
I'm not a big guy. It's just that
you don't have to be. You don't have to be.
It was the energy coming out of me. And it's funny, the facilitator saw Kirsty because Kirsty went to hold my head and he just really quietly grabbed Kirsty and just took her back to a bunch of women because he knew what was just about to happen. And he said, just, can you look after this woman for us? And then I went off like a frog in a sock. And it's, I don't know how long, it was over 10 minutes that it was. And until that point, the point of complete capitulation, like absolutely, I started getting angry, and then the anger took me, and I allowed it to take me, and then I came to this point of absolute exhaustion, complete capitulation, and they put me in the arms of another man, and that's the first time I'd seen my heart, and I remember it to this day. I literally in my mind, I'm feeling encapsulated, like embraced by this masculine energy, and I'm feeling my heart, and I'm feeling like I'm finally a warrior sitting on a horse, but not with armor on, just sitting on a horse. Now, interestingly, that man had post-traumatic stress and was a veteran. But in that moment, he was sitting in the divine masculine of love.
Right.
And he just had this deep connection to me. So just because he's got wounds doesn't mean that he couldn't in that moment just hold that divine elder space for me. And that's when I truly felt it, and that's one of the processes which began my journey home.
The king frequency. I love literature. I did a lot more reading, years back. But my favorite, one that you see a lot is the hero's journey, right? And so I've been reflecting on that off and on for probably a few days, and I thought, wow, because if I look at when I woke up. I went on the street. I didn't know what I was doing. I'm not trying to, create any credit for myself, but very much like a hero's journey, like I just walked, and I had, and I rehabilitated, redeemed, and all that stuff that plays in that storyline. But as I was thinking about it, I thought, well, wow, this is kind of interesting, because if I break down the hero's journey, where's the divine feminine? Where's the divine masculine? And again, they both are contained within me, right? And I thought, well, if I had to describe it, the divine feminine is the energy that I was walking in. Like, it's the world, it's the universe, it's the womb. And then the masculine, and my thoughts actually were something along the lines of what you were saying, like, where does the warrior go now? Because I know the warrior has some attributes that are pure. And so I was thinking, that's it. That's the warrior. It's the resolve. It's the, the building and the construction and the strategizing and the implementation, those things that you would, kind of associate with the masculine energy. But yeah, I can see where both parts play, they're both essential. You can't have one without the other.
Well, the warrior is the one that is always connected to, the balanced warrior is the one that is always connected to the truth, the big T truth, real truth. And the actions, which are the masculine element of us, will be done in truth when the warrior is balanced. And
is connected to the divine king queen within them, the divine majesty. If they're connected to a false king or false regalness, then that action is polluted, and that's what sends us off balance. It's really a great point. What we do a lot of work. Matter of fact, the bush trip I'm just about to go on is to train mentors in this space with our young people doing the Young Warrior program. And I love Joseph Campbell. Actually, Jean Houston, if you want to understand the feminine side of this, Jean Houston's a great person to look into, because she used to work with Joseph Campbell, and Joseph Campbell challenged her to find the feminine in the hero's journey.
Really?
So Jean, not to be pushed around, went and a lot of her work, especially initially around, and Joseph Campbell was in that space. But there's a great book, King, Warrior, Lover, Magician and Lover. And in the book by Gillette and Moore, they describe beautifully the lover archetype required for the warrior. The lover is the one that sharpens the sword. It's the one that gives us the reason to fight. So the work I've done on myself, I needed to understand what the military was for me. Why did I join it at the age of 18? But why, by the age of 4, did I know I was going to join it? Because I was living, my farm, my property that I grew up on was the northern boundary was Puckapunnel Military Training Area, the largest training area in southern Victoria. And there was always tanks or someone there. And Dad was a Vietnam veteran and a padre. So he's had so many people coming through the house that would want to see him because of the demons that they were fighting inside that they brought home from conflict. And it's the whole point. We leave part of our soul on the battlefield, and we bring home these demons. And it's the healing process that doesn't actually occur when veterans come home from the battle. But when people leave that structured society that I talked about before, that healing process again is not done. So, but I had this deep blood of the military through me. So what archetypally did it mean, or does it mean for me? And for me, the military is the most altruistic, pure form of protecting those I love. And that's why I joined the military, because I loved my country and I love the people around me, and I wanted to be seen to be seen. That's the hero aspect, not still needing the external validation, but I wanted to be seen as contributing, being of service, and being willing to do the ultimate, which is to lay down my life for another, for the love of another. Yeah. And if I look at that, there's a real purity to that. But where does that energy go when I sit now as a warrior, knowing that I'm on the cusp of a shift in my life into elderhood? Where does that go? Well, for a warrior, it actually goes into master. So initially I go hero, where everything's external. I'm fighting for the damsel. Did you see me? I go out in the footy field and I run around and tackle the biggest bloke on the paddock and knock him down, and then look over. Did you see me? Did she see me? And then run back. Peacocking or whatever they call it. That's the hero. They're still fighting for all that stuff. Then we transition to this level of maturity where we take back the key to our heart from our mother. One of the biggest things to be done. Lots of people talk about the mother wound. Well, in my experience in the work that I'm doing at the moment, the mother wound for men is the biggest thing on the table, to have that transition from hero to warrior. But then This transition from warrior to master is when they elevate themselves above the fight. They have no longer, they go beyond resilience. They see a conflict occurring and going, okay, she's rising. Why is she rising? Because of the wound here. What does this need? It needs an embrace right now. Stop everything, embrace, show love. Through my loving heart, I have a compassionate ear. It means I can understand you and not get engaged by the daggers which are coming my way in this argument, because I'm realizing that's not about me. The master is never at the point of strike where the fist comes. Just borrowing your fist, babe. If the fist is coming, the master sees it, yeah, and they're never at the point. Matter of fact, they're even seeing this fist 5 minutes ahead of time because they're seeing the pain in the person, and that's where they engage. They engage at the causal level, and that then steps into this place of wisdom, lived knowledge, and they live from this heart space of wisdom. And in that process, then can share the knowledge to the tribe of warriors, the tribe of all the other people.
Yeah.
Morgan asked a question before of what when James was talking about his experience and what is it like for the partner throughout this experience. And the biggest thing for me has been being able to always see myself in him. So when he was fighting, if I was fighting back, he was able to show me why I was fighting back. And I was able to gain a greater understanding of the wounds that were being triggered within me, which then gave me an opportunity again to choose to balance my own masculine and stop and be able to sit. We were so competitive for so many years, and we fought a lot. Like, and our fights were really passionate and lots of yelling, and
lots of makeup sex, good makeup sex.
Lots of makeup sex, and we both had that really strong. We both had the really strong warrior energy within us, and so for me, it was about, but I was connected to the feminine much earlier than James. You know, I had the connection much earlier than James, including in the way that I was raised. I was the eldest of three girls. It was just my mum and the three girls. So I was in a very feminine environment before I joined the army. So I had that already. And I was able to call on that in our healing journey. But for me, that's been the biggest thing throughout James's experience, is being able to allow myself to resonate with him at every point. And sometimes sometimes I couldn't. And at those points when we weren't resonating, I knew that we were actually at different places. I would say to him, we're actually speaking a different language right now. Yeah. I'm speaking Japanese, you're speaking English, and you can't understand me, so I'm going to stop.
Yeah, that's when you need to tap into the feminine intuition and just, you know what I mean? And say nothing, you know, the less you say, the better off you are. But I wanted to ask you, so during this, you know, during your time together, you mentioned competition, that you were both very competitive with each other. Was that something you were open about, or were you conscious of? Were you conscious enough about it to actually discuss it with each other, or was it something you figured out later?
There were two aspects. We were conscious to a level, but we didn't realize how deep it actually went. And that, when I started to realize that, I started to feel really ashamed and really guilty.
My distorted masculine had a lot of issues with him choosing to shift his distorted masculine.
Oh, wow.
When I put back on, because like for a couple of years,
new operating system. Yeah.
I was not wearing the pants in my relationship, which is a typical comment when people ask who's wearing the pants in the relationship. That's about direction setting, and it's a masculine trait. So I'd given them to Kirsty because I just could not operate like that. And then when I started, to really come home in my healing journey and started to realize, hold on, they're my pants. They don't really look good on Kirsty. She's got her own. So I'd start to pull my pants on. Oh, gee, it was a clash of the superheroes. But at the same time, there was that fight within Kirsty. It was amazing to see that the energy had to expel to the point where she capitulated and then could own completely the fight of realizing why she was doing it. And that trust, because we were rebuilding trust in our relationship, which had fizzled for, and I'd betrayed our trust in many respects, as Kirsty had as well. She had to own that part of herself. But going through that process was really, really interesting. I wanted to share just quickly. We're talking about the transition to the next place where the divine masculine can sit there and hold. One of the things that I've realized, we talk a lot about choice in, to put my hand up to seek help when I know that I need help. That's a choice. But something that's really dawned on me in my personal healing journey is I couldn't understand why at times I wasn't making choices which were benefiting me. And then what came to me and some deep realization and work I was doing on myself was my will was being held by the primordial mother. So in archetypal speak, we have a mother wound and a father wound, but then we have a primordial, like a great mother wound and a great father wound, which is deeper still. So our mother and father being the physiological human expression of that in our realm, but the deeper one is this wound that's held, especially for men, by the great mother, and she was holding my will. And it's the mother wound of the analogy of the queen holding the prince's key to his heart, and the prince needs to realize that he needs to take it back from the queen. Well, we're talking the next layer down to the primordial mother. My will was like that, being held by the great mother. And in the work that I did with myself, I had to enter that space to see her in her magnificence, but in her magnificence, which I could very easily see as terrifying. But right. At the same time, have my heart space kept open, no armors involved, but my sword was drawn. And I walked in there and I said, with respect and reverence, I will now take back my will. With respect and reverence, I will now take back my will. And it was really interesting that the way it happened and came back into myself, and this feeling of integration and completeness started. But then this black hand came out and it was going for my heart space. And my cognitive mind was going, well, it's okay. She can't hurt you. Just let it all happen. It's all good. And then my heart space went, no, that's not right. So I grabbed the hand. I didn't need to slash the arm off or defeat the intruder. I just took the hand and with respect and reverence, this will is mine and mine alone, and let it go. And that then tears just came, just deep tears for feeling, as I think someone just said, Tricia just said, reclaiming personal sovereignty. Yeah, that's the whole thing, is this energetic complete realignment of, I understand that Great Mother is simply a reflection of something in me. Right. But this is the point, that the energy is not meant to be there in that aspect. The energy is meant to be here in my aspect. And when it's here in my aspect, the energy of the whole finds its equilibrium.
Yeah. That's pretty powerful. I'm going to think with that for a minute. Another thing I was thinking about too was, if you look at the patriarchal template and the way it normally goes, just due to physical gender, and we know that's not always, it's not always aligned with, the physical gender, but the way it's set up is in that template, the masculine is the perpetrator energy and the female is the victim energy. And another thing that I've kind of thought about over the last, probably 3 or 4 months, really had more to do with what we've talked about before, which is how can we do what you're doing in terms of helping young men and men in general through this transition, because this is all kind of new information. But one of the things that I was looking at was like, okay, if I look at some of the old programming that I had in, let's say, previous relationships and just even day to day, there was another energy that was around. It wasn't perpetrator. It certainly wasn't victim. It was martyr. Because I can remember many times hearing other men that I worked with, and even myself, and sometimes to my partner at the time, I'm out here busting my ass all day long and providing and you know what I mean? And there was and I guess I could be seen as a victim a little bit, but it was more of like, I'm going to get up and do it again tomorrow and I'm going to go down that way. And I just had a relative who personified that. And I think that's a very common thing. He wasn't aggressive. He wasn't certainly wasn't a perpetrator, but there was a certain martyrdom to it. And I think that might be something that we all need to think about a little bit, because it's actually probably something that's shared by both. Because I know a lot of women, especially single women in the contemporary ages, with raising 1, 2, 3 kids, holding the job down, and so on.
A lot of it comes, brother, from the need to be needed. And it all goes also to the need to be needed, then goes into how am I needed? I'm needed through my doing. So my value is placed in my doing, not my being. When we actually reverse that and bring our value as a being back into us, then our doing our doing is an expression of our being, and we lose the need to be needed, because we realize through the transcendence of that individual relationship, we realize that my being is actually enough, and there is no need for anything else. I had that going on for a very large percentage of my life until I finally had to own that, because it wasn't helping us.
Well, and I think another insight too, it's so funny how these things, like in my relationship with Morgan, especially over the last few weeks, where the masculine's really been front and center, and the opportunity for transformation and transcendence of some of these old programs. But if you look at the core energy of sacred sexuality, which is the intimacy of two totally present with each other, not necessarily sexual acts and that type of thing. I'm talking about the energy itself, which I think is really expanding right now, certainly in my life, and I think on this earth. But for instance, on one side you have, and I'm talking where we're coming from, what was she? She was to be grabbed and touched and clawed and utilized, and and we know that because she expressed that to us. That's been part of this coming out of the last few years with the feminine. And I think that kind of that commonality that looks different, and it's really not even a polarity. It's actually the same thing, different journey, looks different. I used to say to my wife at the time, when I was on that treadmill, I feel like I'm just a hard dick and a mule, like that's my function. So why I find that interesting is because I can feel how the feminine, especially these last few weeks, has felt, but I can also remember how he felt. And I'm looking at it going, that doesn't even look like polarity to me. It's like one and the same thing. So we were both like embodying in the wrong way, anchoring in the wrong way, these programs, which are really energy programs, but it was such a physical thing, which is what gives it so much power and gave it so much power. No different than selling the men on going to war to protect the damsel. It's like,
because none of us actually respected her, did we? None of us actually respected that victim female damsel who was just allowing herself to be clawed and walked all over. We didn't have respect for her. And so women are ashamed that we don't respect her, and then men are ashamed because they're doing that to her. And so we just got this cycle and perpetuation of the shame until we actually talk about it and admit that this is what we've allowed ourselves to happen to each other.
I think you raise a really critical point too. It's not necessarily gender specific. It's energetically specific, because there's a lot of men with that damsel inside them that get trodden on. Just if you look at the very unpopular statistics in Australia, 40% of domestic violence is actually woman against man. And it doesn't get aired very much at all because it's not politically correct. But it's not about who's doing it. It's about, if you look at the core, there's a similarity in the perpetrator and in the victim. And that core, it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, that's what we need to look at and own within ourselves, instead of continuing, oh, it's men's fault or it's women's fault or politics. That's just blame. And it's
just that's just a backdoor into the existing loop that we had. But I like what you said about the girls, because you know, I mean, we can talk about it, and we have talked about it, and it's been talked about for a while. You know, that Mars Venus book by John Gray was written in the 80s, if I'm not mistaken. But but I like what you said about the girls. You know, at some point, someone's got to say, I'm not participating anymore. Yeah. And that's really all there is to it. And it's not even about, oh, this one went ahead and stopped it and this one didn't, so this one's better than that one. It's not even about that. It's just about, you know what, this isn't this I'm not going to participate. So at that point, either the other person kind of aligns, or they've got to go find somebody else to you know, to be their playmate. That's right.
Either way, they break their cycle. You know, which
that's right.
is a good thing.
Yeah. And I think when you break, and it's another thing too, like, I think when you break a cycle, you don't have to say anything. Like the energy of the stoppage says it all. So that's why, like, if you see some of the stuff that's going on in these communities with the you know, kind of a very demonstrative commentary and projections and such, as, you know, regarding the election or mass vaccines, that type of stuff. And it's kind of died down. I have to say that too, but it's like, you know, why do you got to be so loud? I mean, you know what I mean? I mean, you can actually just be that, you know, make that choice, and it's done.
What people forget is the action is seen by many, and those that are ready, who see the action, will then question. Yeah. And that means they're ready for something else. Instead of me fighting, people who are dug into the maximum in a defensive position, who are not going, and they're not ready to question in their life. That energy between the fight has not reached the crescendo culmination point. But when my action demonstrates something, and it's like, what's going on there? You know, why? Why have they been able to get through something that I am struggling with? And so therefore I'm going to ask the question. And so therefore I am open to, or maybe open to, receiving something which will cause a more fundamental shift, because it's done by me. It's like, I can see blokes with anger issues. I can smell them a mile away. It's not just blokes though. I quite regularly, when I go into a big population center, I'll put myself into meditation, and I'll do a walking meditation down the mall, you know, the big area with lots of people. And I'll just view everyone and feel everyone. And when I did this last time in Brisbane, which is a large town to you guys, it's a big city for us, but there was 95% of men and women were having lockjaw and were really intense. And funnily enough, were generally wearing black or grey. Or dark blue. It was really, really funny to see the colours as well. Batman. But the thing about it is, if I walk up to them and say, "You're angry, mate, do you want my help with that?"
They're going to punch a hole in the cupboard. Yeah, I know, because I've lived it, and I'm not an elder. But yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah, I could talk to you guys forever. We could go longer, but I got a business meeting in 18 minutes. Okay. We'll have to get together again in a few weeks. But yeah, because I mean, there's so much stuff you brought up, like including the lockjaw thing. You know, when that came into my field, I think it was actually probably about 7 or 8 years ago. And I read it somewhere in a book. And then I started looking, like you were talking about, I started looking at other people, like when they were talking to me, or you know what I mean? And you could see it. It's like physiologically one of the greatest signals you can get that somebody's, you know, in that type of state. Yeah.
Before we end, I just want to pick you up on something you just said. You said, "I'm not an elder. I'd like to question that."
Okay. I accept that because you're my blood and soul brother, or my soul blood brother. And I'm sure that I can say with confidence, and I'm careful what I say now, but I know I'm going to be there in the next year, next 12 months. And I've known that for a long time, but I can't wait to get out to go out into to the bush with you. And I really, really feel the call. I tell Morgan that all the time. She goes, "That's great, but you're not going with me." So I got to have someone to go with because I damn sure I'm not ready to go by myself. Not yet. I don't know where all the animals hide and all that. Hey, you guys take it easy, and all blessings to you and your family and
You
everything
too.
you're doing. Yeah,
And
it's good seeing you. Take care.